again, welcome to week 5 of Learning at Home. Hope things are going well for you, or week 5 of term 2, week 4 of Learning at Home. Remember, if your tables work still a little bit dodgy, spend some time on that website, make sure you bring it up to speed because, again, as you'll see today, you need to be really familiar with your tables. I'm going to now thoroughly confuse you. Our goal for this week is multiplying fractions. Now, everything we've done up until now has been working up towards being able to add and subtract fractions, and step by step you should have learned a process which enables you to achieve that. The thing about multiplying fractions is you now need to learn a completely different method, and you need to remember which one applies where. So I'm going to start out with a brief explanation of how multiplying fractions works, but I'm very quickly going to go to, okay, here's the rule, this is what you do. So, with that in mind, I'm going to look at multiplying a half by 4/5. You might remember in primary school when you did your tables, 3 lots of 2 is 6. The word of is the same as multiply. So, essentially, a half times 4/5 literally means a half of 4/5. So, I've drawn a diagram here, and you should see that I've got 5 parts and 4 of them are shaded. That then represents 4/5. What happens if I then halve it? Essentially, I can put a line through there and halve it. So the bits that I now have are these ones. So what do I actually have? Well, if you think about it, now our rectangle is divided into 10 different parts. And how many of those parts are shaded? The answer is, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4. So a half of 4/5 is 4/10. And you would remember from your work on simplifying fractions that 4 and 10 have a common factor of 2, so this can be simplified by cancelling down to 2/5. So 1/2 of 4/5 is 2/5. Fairly simple sum, fairly long-winded way of working it out. Is there a better way? And the answer is yes. First of all though, we need to look at our sum and see, is there any simplification, cancelling down, I can do before I start? I'll show you why that helps. If I was to do a half times 4/5 and didn't worry about cancelling, your rule for multiplying is 1 times 4 is 4, 2 times 5 is 10. There it is, same answer as that. Much simpler than adding fractions. Don't try and use this method to add and subtract fractions, however it doesn't work. This is how you do multiplication. And remember, our 2 is a common factor, so 4 divided by 2, 10 divided by 2, 2/5. But what I was referring to before about looking for your common factor first means you can actually cancel down with much smaller numbers. On the top line I've got a 1 and a 4. On the bottom line I have a 2 and a 5. The 2 and the 4 have a common factor of 2, so I can divide by 2. How many 2's in 2? 1. How many 2's in 4? 2. If I do that at that stage, I then simply have to do 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 5 is 5. So you go straight to the answer without having to worry about an intermediate step. That's it. That's how you multiply fractions. So let's have a look at some examples over here. Example 18. I've called it example 18 by the way because some of you have got your textbooks and you'll find that it is example 18 in the fractions chapter of your textbook. 2/3 times 1/5. 2 and a 1 on the top line, 3 and a 5 on the bottom line. No common factors, so I simply do 2 times 1 is 2, 3 times 5 is 15. Finished. Let's have a look at our second one, example 18b. 3 and 8 on the top line, 4 and 9 on the bottom line. We do have some common factors here. For example, 3 is a factor of 3 and is a factor of 9. So we divide. How many 3's in 3? 1. How many 3's in 9? 3. Look at the 4 and the 8. There is a common factor of 4. How many 4's in 4? 1. How many 4's in 8? 2. And this reduces it to a very simple multiplication. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. The answer is 2/3. Moving on to example C. It's now presented as 4/8 of 3/6. You simply need to remember that of is the same as multiply, so I change it to 4/8 multiplied by 3/6. And again, looking for common factors. Now this time, my common factors are actually straight under each other. Up here, I had to go top, bottom, across, but here, as long as I've got a number on the top, a number on the bottom, with a common factor, I can cancel. How many 4's in 4? 1. How many 4's in 8? 2. What about the 3 and the 6? How many 3's in 3? 1. How many 3's in 6? 2. And I now have a very simple multiplication again. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. My answer is 1/4. Moving on to example 19. I now have to do a third of 21. And you would say, well, 21's not a fraction. Doesn't matter, we can make it a fraction. Whenever you have a whole number, that can be just written as 21 over 1. Effectively 21 wholes, if you like. So now that my 21 is a fraction, replace the of with multiply, and now I've got 1/3 times 21 over 1. Is there any cancelling there? The answer is yes. 3 into 3 once. 3 into 21 is 7. So I finish up with 1 times 7 is 7 on the top line. 1 times 1 is 1 on the bottom line. And there, of course, we have 7 wholes. So we can write the fraction as just the whole number 7. Moving on to 2/5 of 32. Let's do the same structural rearrangement. Of is times, 32 is 2 over 1. There are no common factors there. So we do 2 times 32, 2 30s are 60, 2 2's are 4, my answer is 64, 5 times 1 is 5. Now we have an improper fraction, so again from the work you did 2 weeks ago, you convert that to a mixed number. How many 5's in 64? The answer 12 and a remainder of 4, so the answer is 12 and 4/5. In your textbook, example 17 was presented as 2/5 of 15 bananas and was actually written in before the others. And the idea would be then you would look at it logically, 2/3 of 15 bananas and say, well, 1/3 of 15 bananas is 5 bananas, 2/3 then is 10 bananas. But we can actually do it the same as I did before with the previous examples. 2/3 of is times, 15 is 15 over 1, cancelling. How many 3's in 3? How many 3's in 15? 2 times 5 is 10, 1 times 1 is 1, so I finish up with 10 bananas. And moving on to this example here, example 20, where we've got 5 over 3 times 7 over 2, then no common factors, so I have 35 over 6. Improper fraction. How many 6s in 35? The answer is 5 6s are 30 and a remainder of 5. So 5 and 5/6. Moving on to example B. 8, 4, cancelling. 4 into 8 twice, 4 into 4 once. 5, 15, cancelling. 5 into 5 once, 5 into 15 3 times. So my answer is 6 over 1, which is of course just 6. I'm going to throw in one more example just to make sure that you are up to speed with things. We can only do our cancelling when we have our numbers as improper fractions. We can't have mixed numbers. So if you have a situation such as 1 1/3 multiplied by 2 2/5, then before you launch into your multiplication method, you need to change each of these to an improper fraction. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4/3, multiplied by 5 times 2 is 10 plus 2 is 12 over 5. Once we've got to this stage, we can look for cancelling. 3 is a factor of 3 and we'll divide into 12 4 times. There are no other common factors, so 4 times 4 is 16, 1 times 5 is 5. We need to convert it back to a mixed number to finish it off. How many 5s in 16? 3, remainder of 1. And that's it for this week. All I want you to do is focus on just learning how to multiply fractions. However, don't come to this before you've actually got on top of all of the previous goals. Make sure you can add and subtract before you move on to multiply. And of course, again, if you need work on your tables, put the time in, because it will only make life much easier for you as you go through grade 7 maths. Also, don't forget, call us on chat if you need any assistance with your work. That's it from me. We'll see you soon.